This morning I was reminded of a very important verse in the Dhammapada, which is Khanti Paramo Paramangta Bodhi Dikkhang. Khanti, patient endurance, is the highest austerity, the verse says. Or sometimes they also translate patient endurance is the highest fire or the best fire burning out defilements. This is not a literal translation, but it's more based on the commentary. But it highlights the importance of Khanti for the eradication of defilements, especially our likes and dislikes, right? Because we cannot always get what we want. Sometimes we can, sometimes we don't. So if every time we don't get what we want, the mind is miserable, complaining, and downcast, then of course we will have a lot of suffering. But if we can maintain a sense of composure, equanimity, even when facing unpleasant situations, then life can be quite easy actually. Samsara doesn't have to be so bad. So some types of dukkha are actually avoidable. Remember the simile of the dart, where the Buddha says, suppose the man was shot by a dart or an arrow, and then of course on account of that he will experience a lot of pain wherever he was shot. This is a physical pain. But then on top of that, some people might also add a second arrow, which is complaining, oh, why me? Oh, I'm so young. Or why? Who is it actually who shot me? What kind of poison did he use? And what kind of arrow? And what kind? So he's kind of proliferating and complaining. And this is a second arrow. The second one is often avoidable. The first one, sometimes you're just struck by an unpleasant experience or something that you can't avoid. That's part of samsara. Welcome to samsara. But then the second part, the mental aversion, the dislike, the complaining, that can be avoided with some degree of mindfulness, a degree of acceptance, understanding. Often the second arrow is actually the worst one, right? So like you have a small injury somewhere or some small mole or something that you don't know where is it coming from. Oh, the mind will go to Google and find all the possible sources. Sure born cancer. I'm going to die probably within a week. No, you just have a small thing that, the skin sometimes has some deformities. It's not a big deal in most cases. So again, the second arrow, it was completely avoidable by worrying, being afraid. So that was optional. So sometimes in life, it can be a good idea not always to go for the way of increasing our comfort to the maximum, but sometimes when life presents small challenges, we can accept them or we can embrace them, even though sometimes you can do something about it. For example, when it's a little bit too warm, so you have a choice, right? You can turn on the fan or turn on the air condition. Or you can just say, well, actually, it's not so bad. It's not as comfortable as it could be, but maybe I can still endure for a while. So you might not take steps to remove the minor discomfort as a way of training the mind. Let me see whether I can maintain my mental composure, my mental equanimity, even when facing smaller discomforts. Or if it's a little bit too cold, really, do you have to turn on the heating system or put on socks and hats? Well, if it's just a little bit too cold, you're not going to die, right? You might not also catch a cold either on account of that. So just going a little bit outside of our comfort zone voluntarily sometimes can be, in this way you strengthen your muscle of Khanti, of patient endurance. Whereas if you always adjust the environment to the maximum comforts, well, some things you still cannot avoid. And then the mind suffers a lot because you're completely not used to any of those things. It's like when we have a small child and you just pamper it from baby time onwards. By the time he's an adult, he cannot face any difficulties because anything that's a bit difficult or challenging will be so painful, so unpleasant. Whereas if we allow ourselves to expose ourselves from time to time to smaller minor discomforts, and this way our ability grows to be at peace with smaller discomforts. One type of discomfort that is almost unavoidable in life is also when we are struck not by a drug, but unpleasant speech. Right? Sometimes people might address you in ways that you don't appreciate. So this also you cannot avoid. So you cannot train everyone to say only pleasing and kind words to you. That's part of life. So again, if you can't even endure a little bit of cold or heat, how are you going to endure abuse or accusations of things that you haven't done? So these are also things sometimes you have just to endure. And just, did I do this? No, actually not. Okay, never mind. Nothing to do with me. A little bit like the lotus simile, the Buddha often uses. The lotus is a nice image because it symbolizes that something can grow out of the dirt. It grows out of the mud, basically, inside the pond, very muddy, filthy on the ground. If you go swimming there and you put your foot down on the earth, no, you don't like that, right? Have you done it before in a lake or somewhere? You swim and you touch the ground, and you feel all muddy underneath. It's not very pleasant. Normally, I don't like that. So out of the mud grows this beautiful plant, and colorful, beautiful, radiant. And interestingly also, even any dirt that lands on it from outside, the rain or birds or whatever, there's no dirt, the dirt is not sticking on it. Somehow the surface of the lotus flower is such that whatever, even water, it just burls down. Like a windshield after washing it, or a glass window, the raindrops don't stick there, they just run down. So the lotus flower also like that. The dirt doesn't stick on it. So in the same way, you can make your mind like a lotus flower. So whatever dirt lands on it, or whatever dirt others might throw at it, don't appropriate, it won't stick, just let it burn down, nothing to do with me, maintain the purity like a lotus flower. So that's why we often like to use the lotus flower as a symbol in Buddhism. One, it stands for purity, but also it stands for the ability to come out of the mud, to come out of the filth of all the defilements and impurities, and then purify the mind to become so radiant, beautiful. So one way, or one step that one can take in this direction is to enduring small and minor discomforts, khanti. And some people think that khanti, patient endurance, is something where you just grind your teeth. Yeah, okay, I can do that. Yes and no. You see, patient endurance also has to do not just grinding your teeth and enduring something, but also peacefully maintaining your mind while being in that situation. If the mind is full of anger, but yet, okay, you're not saying anything, it's still not khanti, really. Because if the mind is full of dislike, aversion, anger, yeah, okay, good, you're not burst into some action or words on account of that. But khanti is actually a mental state. So it's not just avoidance of physical or verbal action, but it's also making peace with it internally. That's why the rendering that Luang Por Sumedho uses, I quite like. It's not the literal translation of the word, but the meaning is encapsulated quite well if you understand it as peaceful coexistence with the unpleasant. And the emphasis here is on peaceful, not just coexistence with what is unpleasant, but being at peace with it, being okay with it. So, especially over things that we can't change anyway, not everything is within our control, and then making peace with it. Okay, that's how it is right now. It's also impermanent. Will go away over time. So that's the right attitude. I remember when I was a newly ordained monk in Myanmar, and I requested my teacher, Pa Sayadaw, to be allowed to go on alms round on a daily basis. Because normally we only collect the food in a place like here, in a refectory, actually even inside the monastery. We don't go out. You can imagine a large monastery, like 300 monks. If we all swarm out to this small village in Baok there, just the villagers wouldn't be able to handle every day 300 monks showing up on the doorstep. What are we going to give you today? So the supporters bring the food to the monastery. It's prepared in the monastery by devotees and then given out to the monks lining up there. But I also always liked the idea of going on actual alms round from house to house in the villages. And normally only very few monks were doing that in Baok. Again, as I said, if everybody goes on alms round, it would be difficult to handle for the small villages. So I requested from Baok Sayadaw permission to do that, and he kindly agreed. I also asked for some advice for going on alms round, and he said, yeah, just go from house to house, whatever you get, you never know. And then I asked him how to do with rain, because sometimes in Baok also can be quite rainy, not as bad as here in Taiping, not as regular, but still, they have a very strong rainy season. He said, well, never mind. If you're hungry, you go on alms round, right? You don't, when there's sunshine, you go on alms round. When there's rain, you collect the food in the monastery. No. If you're an alms round goer, you go. So every day, whether it rains or sunshine or snow, we didn't have snow. So then we would just go on alms round, and sometimes, indeed, there was heavy rain. And another thing also you have to know, in some traditions, or actually according to the Vinaya, when the monks go on alms round, we're supposed to hold the bowl with both hands when collecting food. When walking in the forest or just going to town, we can have the bowl on the back, on the shoulder. But actually when going in the village and collecting the food, we're supposed to hold the bowl with both hands. So you can imagine, you hold the bowl, where are you holding an umbrella? There's no hand free for holding an umbrella. And also, sometimes even they have a bowl lid. So actually you would have to open the bowl when somebody wants to give something inside. So how are you going to handle all of that with only two hands? I'm not Avalokiteshvara with thousands of hands. So, of course, Baok Sayadaw said, well, you don't need an umbrella. You just go, you just walk. Then if it rains a bit, well, never mind, you get a bit wet. If it rains a lot, well, then you get very wet. So in this way, I would walk for an alms round for years. A bit of rain was not a problem. And there was one time, there was actually monsoon season, there came a strong hurricane. You might even have heard it in the news, where many villages, the roofs of the houses, they were flying off. Maybe it was in 2007 or something like that. And I remember I was going on alms round on that day, where the hurricane was coming. We were not in the center of it, but we would still get very strong wind, very strong rain. And I remember going out there, and the rain coming horizontally. It's not coming from top anymore. It's coming just straight in front of you, hitting you in the face. I barely could see anything. I was going on arms round like that. But then, of course, also almost nobody coming out of the houses. Nobody sticking their dough outside because, it's so wet. But then, even there, I did, collect one or two places. I remember I went to a military camp, which was close by. And so they were kind enough to give me some rice and something to eat. Don't need much. So all these small little challenges, of, sometimes you get wet, sometimes you're dry, sometimes it's hot, sometimes a bit cold. That makes you stronger. You know you can survive. You know you will be fine. At the end, you get dry again, right? Or even if it's hot, at the end it will become cool again. So most of the small discomforts are not as bad as they seem. But the mind can make them into big problem. So I would like to encourage you from time to time, when you face yourself in a situation that is maybe not to the maximum of your comfort, you might deliberately refrain from adjusting things. Let me see, can I handle that? And you will see, if you do that from time to time, your ability becomes much stronger, and your need for conditions to always be nice, your need for that becomes less and less, which makes you independent, free. Well, you can be wherever you are. Well, it doesn't have to be nice, don't have to worry too much. When you go on a journey, where will I get food? When I travel, will I have access to this, to that? You will be surviving somewhere, somehow. Okay? So Khanti, one of the most important qualities in the suttas.